Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail. I'm excited to be joined on this episode by Matt Repicky, who is the Senior Vice President, Chief Brand Officer at Tailored Brands. We're going to be talking to Matt about some exciting things that Tailored Brands has in the works, including a recent Prom Your Way campaign. There's a couple of new things as well. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So thanks for joining me today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Excited to be here.
So I want to get us going by having you tell us a little bit about Tailored Brands. And I mentioned your title, but tell us a little bit about your role within the organization.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually Tailored Brands, plural, which is exciting for me because we have a portfolio of menswear brands. Joseph A. Bank, K&G, Moores, and then Men's Wearhouse, which I think is the brand that everybody knows best. My role was really created about a year ago to be, I would say, the ambassador and evangelist across the portfolio. I started with Tailored Brands as the Chief Marketing Officer at Joseph A. Bank. I then took on marketing ownership for our portfolio-wide wedding business. But as we came into 2022, my boss, Carolyn Pollack, who's our Group Chief Marketing Officer, and we realized that we had an opportunity to reintroduce ourselves to customers across the portfolio. And really put an eye on how do we delineate and differentiate our brands by customer segment, and really figure out what the core identity of each brand should be. And so my role sits at the intersection of all of that. I oversee customer insights, consumer communications, all of our creative and in-house production, and have really been working to stand up, I would say, elevated creative messaging and ways of bringing each brand particularly to life.
And we're going to talk about some of those elevated brand messaging campaigns. And we'll start with the first one I alluded to, which is the Prom Your Way campaign. When this recording will be played, it will be kind of prom season. So let's talk about that campaign. Tell us a little bit about what the campaign's all about and what you hope to achieve. And this one is specific to the Men's Wearhouse brand. As you mentioned, there's a family of brands, but tell us a little bit about Prom Your Way.
Yeah. I have been really fortunate and had a varied career, including a lot of time spent marketing on the Barbie brand, which, as you can imagine, is fun. I have to say, doing a prom campaign is the most fun I've ever had. And it's been really exciting to take a brand like Men's Wearhouse that everybody knows, and really kind of turn the way that we bring prom to life on its head, if you will. When I started at the company, we would do a prom campaign that was very, let's shoot in a high school hallway, let's get the mom pinning on the corsage. And I really wanted to tap into the cultural zeitgeist. And so last year was my first time working on the prom campaign, and we photographed in I'll call it outdated shopping mall in Orange County to really kind of tap to what was 90s nostalgia. And as we looked at concepting this year's campaign, 90s nostalgia was still really, really relevant. And so we photographed in a really cool roller rink in the San Fernando Valley. We photographed in a bowling alley. We did some work in studio. And to me, what that really starts to do is showcase the relevancy of our brand and that we know what's happening in youth culture very particularly. So I think that's one really big key element of the campaign. The second piece around just the tagline Prom Your Way, inclusion and representation has been a really important part of the work that I've been doing in my role as Chief Brands Officer. And how do we make sure we're showing the world that a prom goer sees around them? And so starting last year and continuing to this year's campaign, we're casting non-binary, trans, differently abled, differently complected talent to really bring that inclusion to life. And so it's been an interesting marriage, if you will, of this sort of 90s nostalgia coupled with what has been the most inclusive casting that Men's Wearhouse has ever had for prom. And I think Prom Your Way really exemplifies that. Coupling that with showcasing and bringing the brand to life through marketing channels that we may have never worked with before. So as an example, gaming is obviously huge for the teen audience. And so we are big on the Twitch platform. I actually had the privilege of speaking yesterday at Snapchat's Snap Partner Summit and talking about the fact that we're really rolling out increased technology and usage of AR functionality in partnership with Snap. Again, we want to show up where the customer's at, and that team prom going audience is on Snap. They're on Twitch, they're on YouTube. And so I think there's been a sort of culmination of the way that I've brought this campaign to life differently than we've ever done it before.
So let's, you mentioned it, so I want to follow up on the Snap partnership, because that's something that's new that's coming out. I'm sure you're excited to talk about this. Tell us a little bit about how that fits into prom being a big season for Men's Wearhouse.
Yeah.
Tell us kind of the connection and the partnership, and how you envision that being a tool that and channel that your target audience can find value in.
Yeah, certainly. I think we've been working with Snap to go in front of, or get in front of, I should say, the prom audience for a while. We've also offered filters via Snap for the past couple of years, again, very specifically for the prom audience, although I know consumers generally, take advantage of that. But one of the things as we look at, how do you speak to a prom going audience is what platforms are they on? And Snap is clearly one of those platforms. What we started talking about with the Snap team this year was, they have a really keen interest in advancing their AR technologies, and they just actually announced yesterday new AR platforms. And so we are one of the very first retail brands to partner with them on an AR mirror. We're testing it out in our Prom, New Jersey store. And it's being used specifically during prom season because, again, we feel like that prom going audience is digitally fluent. They're on Snap, they're understanding how to use AR, if you will, and they can help the rest of us lead the way. But, what's been really interesting, and the mirror's been in the Pram store for about a week, and I was on the phone with the store team yesterday, and they just talked about how engaging and how fun the mirror experience was for those prom goers. They told me a story of a customer who came in, tried on a couple of looks in the mirror, walked over to the rack, picked that suit off the rack, and purchased it. So it also is about convenience. It's about adaptability. It's about, seeing what's available and not having to necessarily go into a fitting room. And I think one of the amazing things about Men's Wearhouse is how omnichannel we are in the way that we service customers. So you can go on our website, browse, see what you might like, go into store to try it on, or you can do that in the reverse. And so I think where the evolution of this goes in terms of our partnership with Snap is how do we make sure that we offer this type of functionality both on our website and in store.
Yeah, and the digital nature of the prom going audience, to your point, makes this a nice alignment, and that omnichannel nature of the behavior, and it's not only creating engagement in store, but to your point, can be conversion there as well.
Yep.
So can help improve the experience by also driving revenue. So one thing I wanted to get back to, there's in terms of the Prom Your Way initiative, there's a real charitable component to it as well. I know that's something you guys are proud of and probably excited to talk about. So tell us a little bit about kind of the charitable positioning of the Prom Your Way initiative, and then how that is manifested and why it's so important to tailored brands.
Sure. I think one of the things, again, that I really value in working at tailored brands is the community-focused nature. We're in, 650 Men's Wearhouse stores across the country. We're in local communities, and our store associates are part of those communities. And as we look at prom, and again, we're going to high schools, getting students excited to come work with us and pick out product and look amazing for their prom evening. We think it's important also to give back and help those schools in those communities. And so we have a program called Cash for Schools, by which schools sign up and register. And then based on the number of students who end up coming to Men's Wearhouse to get their prom look, we'll give back a portion of those proceeds to the school. And I think this is done in Men's Wearhouse. It's also done on the other brands in the portfolio. And I think it's a really credible way for us to show that we're rooted in the community and we want to give back to the folks in those communities who come and shop and frequent Men's Wearhouse, or, like I said, the other brands in the portfolio. Just the idea of being able to go to a school and give a principal a check for $1,000, $2,000, like, that's meaningful. And again, I think it really shows like how we want to be woven into the towns, the cities, and the communities that we operate in.
And that's trackable across both channels, so it doesn't matter whether they're coming in store or are they purchasing online.
Yep, of course. Yeah. So any purchase, as long as the school is registered with us as a Cash for Schools participant, those transactions are going to be eligible. And yeah, it's not the first year we're doing it. We've been doing this for quite a few years, but I think we wanted to shine a light on it this year, and really let schools know that this is an opportunity for them, and that we're really excited to give back.
When you think about marketing this Prom Your Way initiative, it's probably different than some of the other things you're doing in terms of the audience. It's probably a younger audience. So thinking about that, and you've touched on a little bit some of the digital social channels that the customer is potentially more engaged with, and maybe some of your other traditional Men's Wearhouse customer. Talk about kind of the strategy that goes into planning out, getting the awareness and engagement with this campaign, given the I don't want to say non-traditional Men's Wearhouse audience. Maybe it is your traditional. You could tell me a little bit about the target customer for Men's Wearhouse, but
Sure.
maybe jump in, kind of give me some insight there, Matt.
Yeah, we've long had a prom business, and Men's Wearhouse turns 50 this year. So obviously we've been doing this for quite a while and we're pretty good at it. But I think it's also always important to check back in on where your audience is at. One of our corporate values is customer first, and we want to make sure that we're thinking about the customer and what's important to them. And so in service of that, last year we held a company-wide prom summit. So this was groups from across the company. It's our stores team, it's our operations team, it's our rental distribution center team, it's marketing, it's our merchants. And we came together for a few days to really talk about how do we make this a really incredible prom season. How do we make it easier for customers to come in and find the looks that they want? How do we make sure that we're delivering the level of service that we expect from ourselves to customers every single day? What does the marketing plan look like? What is the right creative messaging? And we collectively talked about this and brainstormed. And what was really great from the space that I sit in is getting, again, store leaders who are in the field talking to customers every day, contributing to marketing ideas. And I think that lends a credibility that I may not always get, a voice I may not always hear. And so I think as we started thinking about Prom Your Way and what we wanted this year's prom season to be like, we very thoughtfully came together and strategized as an organization. And it was really exciting and fantastic to see everybody come together and kind of like put their hands in and say, yep, we're going to do this collectively, we're going to be a team. And that's really how it's played out.
Yeah, and I'm going to get back to, I think you raised a good point. I want to talk a little bit more about the internal workings and in terms of that collaboration between your brand team and merchant teams and store teams and marketing. There's so many different voices in the mix to
Yep.
Execute as you want. But put that on hold for one sec, because we've talked a lot about prom, and obviously that's a big piece of the Men's Wearhouse business. But the other big piece, or one of the other big pieces, is weddings. So there's been some news out this week in terms of the unveiling of the Wedding Wingman, which is the ultimate online concierge for grooms. So tell us a little bit about that. This is some interesting new information coming out from Men's Wearhouse. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, definitely. Again, to me, it goes back to the corporate value that I mentioned of customer first. And we did some consumer research. We heard from about half of those that we surveyed that they thought the planning process was complicated and time consuming. And, again, we regrouped internally, very similar to the way I described how we came up with our prom campaign. We, as an organization, sat down and said, okay, how do we address this? And, an idea that rose to the top was Wedding Wingman. And it is really built as this digital concierge, if you will. And so it starts with asking folks a few simple questions. When is your wedding? Where is it at? What is the theme that you have in mind? Do you have a color palette in mind? And based on those answers, we start to share different looks with them that they could potentially choose. Again, we built this entirely in-house. It was like a huge collective effort. We did it in record time. Rolled it out in some test markets a few months ago. And again, immediate response, I was able to talk to some of the store teams. Immediate response was that customers who used Wedding Wingman, by the time they came into store, it cut down the amount of time they had to spend in store figuring out and picking their looks, which was exactly what we were trying to achieve. So that was really exciting. Again, we took the pilot store's feedback to make the experience better, and then we rolled it out nationally a couple of weeks ago. And then, like you mentioned, announced it publicly this week that it was available for anyone to use. And again, I think what's really exciting is that this is, again, taking customer insights, responding to those insights, all in service of making the customer experience better. And it's so similar to what I just described on how we're approaching Prom Your Way, right? Like, we're working with Snapchat and their AR functionality to make the customer shopping experience better. And that's what excites me about being a part of Taylor Brands and just the focus we have on making the customer first, but also how do we just keep leaning in on technology or other ways to improve the customer experience.
Yeah, and it kind of seems to me to be similar to a loyalty program in that you're gathering all this valuable profile information about the customer to make that experience easier when they do come in store, when they are ready to make that purchase. You've kind of done that homework, I should, so to speak, in terms of understanding what their needs are, so that you can then deliver on that experience. Is that it's now available nationwide? So
it is, yeah.
Okay.
So you can go to our website, and or you can go on your phone, as most people do, and take advantage of the Wedding Wingman tool. And again, like, we're excited. There's going to be continued functionality that we're going to introduce to continue to improve the experience. Wedding Wingman was, I think, the first and pretty large step, and we're just excited to see how it does.
Is content a part of that future plan? You talked a little bit about product and getting them in the right products, but just kind of as an engagement tool, how does content fit in the mix there as well?
Yes, content is a huge strategy for us. And within my organization, I actually did some reorganizing this year to create a standalone content team. And I think there's a couple things behind that. One is we have a really close partnership with Google and with their YouTube teams. And talk a lot to them about how do we make sure we're getting the best content in front of our customers, and how do we test and learn, and how do we better understand what the customer is looking for from us in terms of the types of content that we create. And so last year for our spring men's Wearhouse campaign, I want to say we had about 45 different edits. This year we had about 180 because content's important, and we want to make sure that you talked a little bit about personalization and like, how do you gather the information that's most important to your customer? We want to do that with content as well, and make sure we're servicing them with the information that they want when they want it. And so content is a huge focus, not just for Wedding Wingman, not just for Prom, but across the brand, to make sure that, again, we're showing up in the right way and engaging customers.
And you mentioned this, and I'll get back to that collaboration piece. You mentioned this was an in-house build. This is something that you guys worked on and rolled out rather quickly. Yep. So that brings in development and IT into the mix. So, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Prom Your Way, how that fits into merchant to store operations. So tell us a little bit about the internal process when you come up with these campaigns. Who gets involved? How do you kind of figure out the stakeholders' timelines? I know it's kind of a big task, and maybe if you can boil it down to kind of getting started, at least. I know there's many steps along the way, but maybe when you're coming up with the genesis of a campaign like Prom Your Way or Wedding Wingman, tell us a little bit about how you get step one started.
Yeah, certainly. Because I have the privilege of talking to you today, but sort of behind me, if you will, are all of my peers across the organization who also play a really heavy hand in bringing all of these to life. And especially on Wedding Wingman, that was led by Suzanne Scott, who's our SVP of Digital, by Jeff Usforge, who's our SVP and GMM of the rental business, by our technology partners. And so I think if you take as an example Prom Your Way and how that comes to life, again, we normally have a company-wide kickoff or a summit or a meeting by which everyone gets together, and we spend a couple of days brainstorming and really hashing out what are the things we want to accomplish, what are our goals. I've worked at a lot of companies. One of the things I appreciate most about Taylor Brands is the level of collaboration, frankly, and that everybody kind of jumps in and does what it takes to make things happen. But again, going back to Prom Your Way, there was a meeting. We talked about what are our goals? What are the things we have to accomplish? Everybody, I think, weighed in, whether it was part of your discipline or not. We leave those meetings with a pretty clear set of, okay, here are the objectives and the things we're going to work to accomplish. And then each functional group goes off and starts their work. Then we tend to have weekly, bi-weekly check-ins where folks are sharing out across the organization, what's being worked on. And we found that to be successful. And so, I own a piece of it within, again, like the creative, the marketing messaging, the production of the work. But I have to make sure that I am delivering on and featuring, for example, the product that the merchants, think of the key items for the season, right? And so it takes that collaboration to make sure that it's all going to be successful.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing, continual. You're probably gathering data and measuring progress, and then refining and updating as you go.
Well, and that's, again, speaking to sort of a content strategy, that sort of test and learn, the refinement, that's, a key to how we make our content better, right? We have to understand engagement metrics. We have to do, qual focus groups and hear directly from customers. Like, what do they think about the work that we're producing and creating, right? All of those things collectively are going to make them better. I am a huge proponent of, working with agility and listening to the customer and reacting and improving as you go.
So to kind of wrap up, Matt, I'm interested. It's crazy as it sounds when this episode will play. We're almost at the halfway point of 2023. So looking at the back half of the year, we've talked about some really cool initiatives, the Prom Your Way, Wedding Wingman, the partnership with Snap. What are some of the, other growth opportunities, things you're excited about for Tailored Brands second half of 2023?
Yeah, I mean, your listeners may not all know this, but September, October are the biggest wedding months of the year. And so, wedding is, as I started leading the marketing for our wedding business, I learned a lot about the industry. The holiday time frame is when everyone gets engaged. Then, spring, you're planning your wedding, although there are definitely, a set of spring weddings. But then September, October is when everyone gets married. So I'm super excited for September and October. For more and more customers to use Wedding Wingman, give us learnings about the tool, sort of like proof of concept, if you will, at that stage, because it's hopefully going to be, mass usage. And then really getting ready for what we call proposal season, which is from Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day. We know from our partners at Google that engaged customers are tending to work with brands who they already know by the time they get engaged. And so that consideration is super important for us in that holiday timeframe when everybody is proposing and getting engaged. And so we have started over the past number of years, really rolling out significant marketing efforts during proposal season to make sure that we're front and center when people are having those special moments.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work here in the first half of the year, and hopefully that bears fruit in the second half of the year. And you guys have kind of laid the foundation. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Matt Repicky, Senior Vice President, Chief Brands Officer at Tailored Brands, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Talks. It's really been a fun conversation, Matt, and talking about some of the exciting things you guys have got going on. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.